The hallway buzzes with whispered conversations, students moving in clusters, exchanging glances filled with intrigue and mischief. The camera follows a particular group, 3 boys and a girl, their smirks sharp as they lean in close, eyes locked on a new presence in the classroom. She has no idea who she's dealing with, one of them murmurs, a sly grin stretching across his face. The subject of their attention? Emily Carter. 17 years old, her brown hair is tied in a simple ponytail, her gaze calm yet piercing. She doesn't stand out at first glance, just another transfer student trying to blend into an unfamiliar environment. But Emily isn't just any new girl. She carries a secret that sets her apart from the rest. She's the daughter of the town's sheriff, and more than that, she assists him. Not in a casual after-school kind of way, but in a way that has given her skills beyond her years. Observation, strategy, control. And she can already tell something is wrong here. Westridge High isn't just another school with cliques and gossip. The tension in the air isn't just teenage drama, it's fear. And fear always has a source. Rumors swirl about a group of students who dictate the rules, not through popularity, but through intimidation. The Thundersons, a name spoken in hushed tones, a presence felt even when unseen. They control the halls, the students, even the teachers with their unchecked power. Emily watches, listens, learns. She's not one to stand idly by, but she also knows that recklessness is a weakness. If she's going to do something, she needs to be smart about it. And she will do something. Because no matter how powerful the Thundersons think they have never encountered someone like Emily Carter. This is just the beginning. Don't miss a single moment of this story, because what's coming will leave you speechless. The bus rumbled to a stop in front of Westridge High, its doors hissing open. Emily Carter stepped out, adjusting the strap of her bag over her shoulder. She took a steady breath, eyes scanning the school in front of her. It looked normal enough. Red brick, large windows, a field out back where a few students were already gathered. But something in the air felt off. It wasn't the usual first-day nerves that other new students might feel. It was tension, the kind that settled in unnoticed until you knew how to look for it. She walked through the entrance, merging into the stream of students. Almost instantly, she felt the weight of eyes on her. Some curious, some indifferent, and some sharp. Too sharp. She ignored them for now, focusing on her surroundings. Details mattered. The flickering hallway light, the deep scratches on the wooden classroom doors, as if someone had tried to carve something out. The way certain students avoided looking at others. She wasn't just at a new school. She was stepping onto a battlefield. A voice snapped her out of her observations. "Hey, new girl." Emily turned to find a petite girl with wavy blonde hair and a welcoming, if somewhat nervous, smile. "You look like you could use a friend," the girl continued, shifting her books in her arms. "And trust me, you're going to want one." Emily raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" The girl sighed, lowering her voice. "It's not like other schools. You don't get to just exist here. Either you fall in line or—" She hesitated, looking around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Or what?" Lisa didn't answer right away. Instead, she subtly tilted her chin toward a group gathered near the lockers. A tall guy leaned against the wall, his posture effortless, like he owned the place. His dark eyes scanned the hallway lazily, but there was something calculated about them. He wasn't alone. 2 other boys flanked him like bodyguards, and a girl stood close to his side, whispering something in his ear before laughing. Emily didn't need Lisa to say it. This was the source of the tension. "Jack Turner," Lisa finally murmured. "Leader of the Thundersons." Emily took in the group. The way students moved around them, careful to give them space. The way teachers pretended not to notice them. They weren't just some high school clique. They were a force. Lisa leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "They run this place. Teachers don't stop them. Students don't cross them. If you're smart, you—" Before she could finish, Jack looked up, his gaze locked onto Emily's. He wasn't just glancing at her, he was assessing her. Emily didn't look away. She held his gaze, calm, unreadable. Jack's lips curled into a slow smirk. He said something to his group, and suddenly they were all looking at her, whispering, laughing. Lisa stiffened beside her. "They've noticed you. Just don't make eye contact and maybe they won't bother." Too late. Jack pushed himself off the locker and started toward them. His group followed, moving in perfect sync, a wall of control in the middle of the hallway. He stopped just in front of Emily, tilting his head. New face. Emily didn't flinch. "Just moved here." Jack studied her, as if deciding something. You'll find that things work a little differently around here. Lisa cleared her throat nervously. Jack, come on, she just got here. Jack ignored her, still watching Emily. See, we have a way of doing things. And if you're smart, you'll... Emily cut him off. Let me guess, she said, voice steady. There are rules and you decide who follows them. Jack's smirk faltered, just for a fraction of a second. One of the other guys, Mike, scoffed. You think you're tough? Emily gave him a slow, deliberate once-over before returning her attention to Jack. I think you're wasting my time. Silence. Then, Jack chuckled, low, amused. But behind it, something else. Something calculating. Interesting, he murmured before turning away. His crew followed, but not before Sarah, the girl at his side, gave Emily a lingering, appraising look. Then she smirked and disappeared down the hall. Lisa let out a breath she had been holding. Oh my God, Emily! What was that? Emily picked up her bag. Just saying hello. Lisa shook her head, voice dropping. You have no idea what you just did. Emily smiled slightly. I think I do. Because now Jack Turner was curious, and that meant Emily had just entered the game. Jack Turner didn't believe in coincidences. When Emily Carter walked into Westridge High, something about her didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just that she was new. New students arrived all the time. Most kept their heads down, quickly learning their place, but not her. She met his gaze without flinching, didn't shrink away when he confronted her. And the way she spoke, measured, controlled. It wasn't the usual false bravado some kids put on to act tough. No, there was something else beneath the surface, and Jack Turner didn't like mysteries. Emily could feel the weight of his stare long after their encounter. Even as she sat in her next class, she could sense him watching her through the glass panel in the door. It didn't rattle her. She had expected it. She had challenged the unspoken king of Westridge High, and now she was officially on his radar. By lunchtime, the tension had settled into the air like a storm waiting to break. Lisa nudged her tray forward, whispering as they walked toward an empty table. They're talking about you. Emily didn't need to ask who. She already knew. A few students glanced her way, quickly looking down when she met their gaze. Others whispered behind cupped hands. She was used to attention, moving from town to town. It always happened for a while. But this was something else. Lisa hesitated before sitting. Emily, listen. You don't understand who you're dealing with. Emily picked up her sandwich, calmly unwrapping it. Then explain it to me. Lisa glanced toward the far end of the cafeteria. There they were. Jack sat in the center, completely at ease, his presence commanding the space without effort. To his left, Mike and Derek, his closest lieutenants, brash, loyal, and quick to enforce his rules. And to his right, leaning in close, was Sarah. Emily studied her for a moment. There was something about Sarah, the way she watched people, the way her smile never fully reached her eyes. If Jack was the king, Sarah was the queen, the one who saw things before they happened, the one who whispered in his ear. Lisa's voice lowered. They're called the Thunder Sons. Jack runs everything. Who sits where, who speaks, even what the teachers can and can't do. His father is on the school board, so no one stops him. Emily took a bite of her sandwich, unfazed. That explains why they're comfortable. Lisa gave her a sharp look. It's not just comfort, it's control. You don't get it yet. Emily wiped her fingers with a napkin, glancing back at Jack's table. She could feel it again. The assessment, the quiet calculation. He was watching her just as much as she was watching him. Then he stood. Lisa inhaled sharply. Oh no! Jack crossed the room slowly, taking his time. Students fell silent as he passed, the tension thickening. By the time he stopped at Emily's table, the entire cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Sarah and the others stayed seated, but they were watching too, waiting. Jack placed both hands on the table, leaning down slightly. So, Emily Carter. Emily met his gaze. Jack Turner. A flicker of something crossed his face. Mild surprise, maybe. She wasn't just some clueless new girl. I like to know who's in my school, he said smoothly. Where they come from, why they're here. Emily leaned back slightly. That's a lot of effort. Do you personally welcome every new student? Mike let out a low chuckle from across the room. Derek smirked. Sarah just tilted her head, intrigued. Jack, however, didn't move. Only the ones who catch my attention. Emily held his gaze, unblinking. And have I? Jack studied her for a long moment before pushing off the table. We'll see. And just like that, he turned and walked back to his table. Lisa exhaled, shaking her head. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the dumbest." Emily picked up her drink, taking a calm sip. "I guess we'll see." From across the room, Jack Turner watched her with an expression she couldn't quite place. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure who had the upper hand. Emily had spent enough time around criminals to know one thing: power isn't real if it's built on fear alone. The Thunder Sons were powerful, yes, but what really kept them in control? The silence of the students? The apathy of the teachers? Or was there something deeper? Something Jack Turner didn't want anyone to see? She intended to find out. The school library was mostly empty after hours, which made it the perfect place to start digging. Emily sat at one of the back tables, her laptop open as she typed quickly. She wasn't looking for the obvious. She wanted patterns, trends, reports, anything that might explain why the Thunder Sons were truly untouchable. Lisa sat across from her, arms crossed. "This is crazy, you know that, right?" Emily kept her eyes on the screen. "You're free to leave," Lisa groaned. "I never said I was leaving. I don't know why you care so much." Emily paused, then met Lisa's gaze. "Because I've seen people like them before, and if no one stops them, they don't just stay in control, they get worse." Lisa hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but you should know you're not the first person who's tried." Emily's fingers stilled over the keyboard. "What do you mean?" Lisa bit her lip, glancing around before lowering her voice. "Tommy. Who's Tommy?" Lisa hesitated, then stood. "Come on, I'll introduce you." Tommy was quiet. Too quiet. When Lisa brought Emily to meet her, she barely looked up from her sketchbook, her pencil moving in slow, deliberate strokes. "Tommy, this is Emily. I know who she is." Tommy's voice was flat. Emily sat down across from her. "Lisa said you tried to stand up to Jack." Tommy's hand tightened around her pencil, but she didn't stop drawing. "I tried to report him. Told a teacher what he was doing." Emily watched her carefully. "What happened?" Tommy finally looked up. Her dark eyes were unreadable. "Nothing." Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "It's true. The teacher told her they'd look into it, but a few days later the report just disappeared." Emily felt a slow burn in her chest. "And Jack?" Tommy let out a bitter laugh. "He made sure I got the message." She rolled up her sleeve. Faint bruises still marked her wrist. "His guys cornered me after school, told me if I ever tried it again, I wouldn't walk away." Lisa looked down. "That's why no one does anything. It's not just about getting in trouble, it's about survival." Emily sat back, exhaling slowly. So that was it. That was the real power Jack held. Not just fear, but the certainty that no one would ever hold him accountable. For a moment, the three girls sat in silence. Then Emily spoke. "If I'm going to take them down, I need your help." Lisa's eyes widened. "Take them down? Emily, this isn't just a group of bullies. Jack owns this school. No." Emily's voice was firm. "He only owns it because people let him." "That stops now." Tommy studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she set down her pencil. "What do you need?" Emily's lips curled into a small, determined smile. "Everything you've got." The first real move had just been made. Jack Turner had no idea what was coming. Emily had learned a long time ago that the best way to dismantle a system wasn't through reckless attacks. It was through information. If she was going to take down the Thunder Sons, she needed evidence, and she knew exactly where to start. The school felt different now. Ever since Emily's encounter with Jack in the cafeteria, the students watched her differently, some with curiosity, others with unease. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was the girl who didn't back down. Lisa walked beside her, her voice hushed. "I still think this is insane." Emily kept her pace steady. "Noted." Lisa groaned. "You're not going to change your mind, are you?" Emily glanced at her. "Would you if you were in my place?" Lisa hesitated, then sighed. "No, but that doesn't mean I like it." They reached an empty classroom near the back of the school. Inside, Tommy was already waiting. A stack of old notebooks and papers spread across the desk. Emily shut the door behind them. "What did you find?" Tommy pushed the papers toward her. Years of complaints, reports, rumors, all of it tied back to Jack and his guys. Emily flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the notes. Threats, vandalism, physical intimidation, and nothing was ever done. Lisa crossed her arms. "It's all useless. If no one cared back then, why would they care now?" Emily closed the notebook and looked up. Because we're not just going to file another complaint. Lisa frowned. Then what are we doing? Emily smiled slightly. We're making sure everyone sees what's been hidden. For the next 2 days, Emily, Lisa, and Tommy worked in secret. They gathered photos, testimonies, and documents, anything that proved the Thunder Sun's reign of terror. But it wasn't enough to collect the evidence. They had to expose it. Which is why, on Friday morning, every student at Westridge High woke up to find a new anonymous Instagram account had been created, and it was posting everything. Jack Turner stood in the middle of the hallway, scrolling through his phone, his jaw clenched. Post after post exposed the Thunder Sun's past actions, photos of trashed lockers, screenshots of anonymous messages detailing threats, even an old report with his name listed under aggressor. He looked up slowly. The hallway was quieter than usual, students pretending not to look at him, but he could feel it. The power had shifted. Someone was challenging him, publicly, and Jack Turner did not tolerate threats. His eyes scanned the hallway until they landed on her. Emily Carter stood by her locker, calmly placing a book inside as if nothing had changed. But Jack knew, and he had just found his target. The moment the posts went live, the school changed. The once unshakable dominance of the Thunder Suns was now cracked, their power no longer as certain as it had been. Students whispered in the hallways, some daring to glance at Jack and his crew without the usual fear in their eyes. But Jack Turner wasn't the kind of person to let things slip, and Emily Carter knew that. She just didn't know how fast he would retaliate. By lunch, the tension in the cafeteria was suffocating. Conversations were quieter. Students picked at their food, eyes flicking toward Jack's table, waiting to see what he would do. Jack sat with his elbows on the table, staring at his phone, scrolling through the account that had exposed him. His expression was unreadable, but Emily could see it in the way his fingers curled slightly around the device. He was pissed. Lisa nudged her under the table. He knows it's you. Emily took a sip of her drink, unfazed. He suspects. Lisa gave her a look. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Before Emily could respond, movement. Jack stood up. The entire cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. He walked toward Emily's table, slow and deliberate. His crew followed, their usual smirks gone. Sarah stayed seated, but Emily could feel her watching, calculating. Jack stopped in front of her table, placing both hands on the surface, leaning in slightly. Having fun? He asked, voice calm but laced with something dangerous. Emily met his gaze. Always. A muscle in his jaw twitched. You think this is a game? Emily tilted her head slightly. Isn't it? Silence. For the first time, Jack didn't have an immediate response. Mike shifted beside him. You have no idea what you just did. Emily glanced at him, then back at Jack. I think I do. Jack exhaled slowly, then straightened. You want to play? His voice was quiet now, but heavy, dangerous. Emily didn't blink. Already am. Jack's lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. Then don't cry when you lose. With that, he turned and walked away. But Emily knew. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Jack Turner wasn't the type to make threats. He was the type to deliver them. Emily knew that the moment she stepped into the school the next morning. The air had changed. He had done something. She just didn't know what yet. Lisa was waiting by her locker, eyes wide with worry. Emily, something's wrong. Emily pulled out her books, calm. What happened? Lisa lowered her voice. Jack, he's setting something up. Emily already expected retaliation, but Lisa's expression made her pause. Go on. Lisa swallowed hard. He told Mike and Derek to handle you. I don't know what that means, but they're waiting somewhere. Emily took a breath. Where? Lisa shook her head. I don't know. They didn't say. Emily nodded slowly, already calculating her next steps. Jack wasn't just striking back. He was setting a trap. And if he thought she'd walk into it blindly, he was in for a surprise. By the time the final bell rang, Emily had a plan. She waited by her locker, keeping her senses sharp. Then she felt it. The shift in the hallway. The way students suddenly weren't looking at her. The way the usual noise quieted as she moved. She was being funneled, led, toward the gym. Emily's heartbeat remained steady as she stepped through the open doors. The large empty space stretched before her, dimly lit by the fading afternoon sun. And then, the doors slammed shut behind her. She was trapped. Jack's crew emerged from the shadows. Mike, Derek, two other guys she hadn't seen before. Mike grinned. You've been making a lot of noise, new girl. Derek cracked his knuckles. Jack figured it's time you learned how things work. Emily stood her ground, unfazed. Let me guess, this is the part where I'm supposed to be scared? Mike smirked. You should be. Then they moved. Emily was ready. She sidestepped Mike's first grab, twisting out of reach before throwing a sharp elbow into Derek's ribs. He grunted, stumbling back, but the other two closed in fast. She couldn't win a 4-on-1 fight, but she didn't need to. She just needed to buy time. Emily dodged, weaving through their attacks, using their own momentum against them. She had trained for this, not just physically, but mentally. Then, just as Mike lunged again, she stepped back and spoke. Do you really think the sheriff's daughter wouldn't be prepared for this? Everything stopped. Mike froze mid-step. Derek's eyes widened. The other two exchanged glances, and then, finally, realization. Emily smiled slightly. Yeah, that sheriff. My father. Silence crashed over the gym, and just like that, the entire game changed. For the first time since she had stepped into Westridge High, Emily saw uncertainty in Jack Turner's crew. Mike's stance wavered. Derek's fists, once clenched, now hung loosely at his sides. The two other guys, once ready to fight, exchanged a glance that screamed, "We messed up." Emily took a slow step forward, her gaze steady. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice calm but firm. "Didn't expect me to have backup?" Mike scoffed, shaking off his hesitation. "So what? Your dad's the sheriff. That doesn't mean anything." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't it?" She took another step, watching as they subtly edged back. "You really think I came to this school without knowing who you are? What you do?" Derek swallowed, his confidence cracking. "Jack didn't say anything about this." Emily smirked. "Of course he didn't, because Jack doesn't like to lose control. And right now," she let the silence hang for a moment, "he doesn't have it." Mike's jaw tightened, his bravado slipping. "This isn't over." Emily gave him a slight shrug. "No, but it's getting close." They hesitated for a few seconds longer, before finally stepping back one by one. The tension in the gym didn't dissolve completely, but Emily knew she had planted a seed of doubt. And doubt was all she needed. That night, Emily sat in her room, phone in hand. Lisa and Tommy were on a group call, their voices low but urgent. "This changes everything," Lisa whispered. "They won't just come at you physically anymore. Jack will play dirty." Emily nodded, already expecting it. "Let him." Tommy exhaled. "What's the next move?" Emily leaned back, her mind working. Jack still had power, but now he also had pressure. He knew she wasn't just some random student stirring up trouble. She had leverage. She needed to make him break. Emily smiled. "We make him act first." Lisa frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily's voice was steady. "Jack thrives on control. If we push him enough, he'll try to shut me down himself. And when he does," Tommy caught on first, "we catch him in the act." Emily nodded. "Exactly." Lisa hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" Emily glanced at her phone screen. An anonymous message had popped up an hour ago. "We need to talk." "Jay," she smirked. "Yeah, I'm sure." Because Jack Turner was starting to sweat. And now it was time to end this. Jack Turner had never been cornered before. His power had always been absolute, built on fear, loyalty, and silence. But now people were whispering in the hallways. Now students who once avoided his gaze were looking at him like he was losing his grip. And the worst part? He didn't know how to stop it. Which is why, as Emily stared at the anonymous message on her phone, "We need to talk." Jay. She knew she had him exactly where she wanted. The meeting place was set. An old storage room behind the gym. Neutral ground. Emily arrived first. Not because she was eager, but because she needed to control the space. She positioned herself strategically, back to the wall, facing the door, every possible exit mapped out in her head. Then the door creaked open. Jack stepped in alone, his usual smirk gone. He wasn't in control this time, and he knew it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jack let out a slow breath, shutting the door behind him. "You're making a mistake." Emily crossed her arms. "Funny, I was about to say the same to you." Jack exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was quieter now, lacking its usual arrogance. "This school, this town, it doesn't work the way you think it does." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Then explain it to me." Jack hesitated. His fingers curled into fists before he forced them to relax. "You think I built this all by myself? You think the Thunder Sons exist because I decided to start a gang?" Emily didn't answer. She let the silence push him further. Jack scoffed. This goes beyond me, Emily. You think I run this school? I only hold the leash, the real power. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. It's outside of here. Emily's eyes narrowed. Then who are you afraid of? Jack clenched his jaw, and in that tiny moment of hesitation she saw it. Fear. Not fear of losing control, not fear of being exposed. Something bigger. Emily held his gaze. Oh, protecting someone. Jack's entire body went rigid. For the first time, Emily saw the cracks in his carefully built armor, and that's when she realized Jack Turner wasn't the real leader. There was someone above him, someone worse. Jack shook his head, stepping back. You don't want to dig into this. Emily tilted her head slightly. What happens if I do? Jack exhaled, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he turned toward the door. You won't like what you find. He left without another word. Emily stood in the empty room, her mind racing. Jack Turner had been her target from the start. But now, he was just another piece of the puzzle, and the real fight was only beginning. Emily Carter had spent weeks picking apart the system that held Westridge High in its grip. She had exposed secrets, shaken alliances, and forced Jack Turner into a position he had never been in before, defensive. But now, everything was coming to a head, and Jack, who had spent years ruling the school unchallenged, was about to make his final move. The real battle was about to begin. The school day was already off to a tense start. Emily could feel it in the air, the way students watched her differently now. Some with admiration, some with hesitation, and some with plain fear. Not of her, but of what she had done. The posts had spread like wildfire. The account exposing Jack and the Thunder Sons had taken on a life of its own. Students were talking, whispering in the hallways, screenshots passing through group chats like forbidden contraband. Jack Turner's power wasn't just dented, it was crumbling, and that made him dangerous. Emily wasn't naive. She had expected retaliation, but when it finally came, it was faster and more direct than she anticipated. It happened in the middle of the school day. She was heading to class, Lisa at her side, Tommy a few steps behind. The three of them had stuck together lately, knowing that Jack wouldn't sit still for long. But as they rounded the corner, everything changed. The usual noise of the hallway died. Students who had been chatting suddenly fell silent. A ripple of movement spread through the crowd as people turned, their attention locked onto something, or rather someone. Jack. He was walking straight toward her, not alone. Mike and Derek flanked him, their expressions cold and unreadable. Sarah followed a few steps behind, arms crossed, her gaze sharp. A few others lingered in the background, watching, waiting. The tension thickened like a thunderstorm about to break. Lisa whispered under her breath, barely moving her lips. Emily, this is bad. Emily didn't reply. She already knew, but she didn't stop walking. She didn't back down. Jack stopped in front of her, just a few feet away. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, in a voice that carried through the entire hallway, Jack said, "We need to talk." Emily kept her face neutral. "We already did." Jack's eyes darkened. Not like this. The silence around them was suffocating. The entire school was watching, waiting. Jack exhaled sharply, shifting his stance. He wasn't smirking like usual. This wasn't his usual act. This was something different. A final stand. "You want to take me down?" His voice was controlled, but Emily could hear the weight beneath it. The frustration, the cornered anger. "Fine, do it." Murmurs rippled through the hallway. Students glanced at each other, phones subtly recording from the edges of the crowd. Emily met his gaze, unblinking. "That's the plan." Jack stepped closer, his voice dropping slightly. "Then do it now." He lifted his chin, almost daring her. "Tell everyone what you've got." Lisa tensed beside her. Tommy shifted uneasily. It was a challenge, a trap. Jack was betting that Emily wouldn't go through with it. That maybe, just maybe, she didn't have enough to finish him off. Emily's lips curled slightly. All right. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. Then, with a simple flick of her finger, she turned it around so Jack and everyone else could see. The school's main Instagram page was open, and a new post had just gone live. Jack Turner exposed. Everything you need to know. Silence. Then the hallway erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a chorus of notifications buzzing in pockets and backpacks. Students scrambled for their phones, scrolling, reading, whispering. Lisa let out a small, almost disbelieving breath. Tommy smiled. "Jack, Jack went still. Emily watched as he pulled out his own phone, his fingers moving quickly over the screen. His eyes flickered back up to hers, dark, furious, trapped. For the first time since she had arrived, Jack Turner wasn't in control. Emily tilted her head. "You said to do it now." She slid her phone back into her pocket. "So I did." Mike and Derek exchanged uneasy glances. Sarah, who had always remained collected, stiffened, her eyes darting between Jack and Emily. The crowd around them grew louder. Jack exhaled slowly. His fists clenched at his sides for just a moment before he forced them to relax. His breathing was measured, but Emily could see the tension rippling through him. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he smirked. But it wasn't his usual arrogant smirk. It was something colder, sharper. "You think this is over?" His voice was quiet now, meant only for her. Emily's expression didn't change. "I think you just lost." Jack let out a low, almost amused chuckle, but there was no amusement in his eyes. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. His crew followed, but they didn't look victorious. They looked uncertain. The second Jack disappeared around the corner, Lisa grabbed Emily's arm. "Holy crap." Tommy grinned. "That was beautiful." Emily let out a slow breath. It wasn't over. Not yet. But she had just pushed Jack Turner to the edge. And now he had two choices: fall or fight back harder. Emily had a feeling she already knew which one he would pick. Jack Turner had always been the one setting the rules. For years he dictated what happened at West Ridge High. Who spoke, who stayed silent, who thrived, who suffered. But in the span of a few weeks that power had been challenged, piece by piece, until finally it cracked. And now, with Emily Carter standing in front of him, his empire was on the verge of collapse. But Jack Turner wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat. He had one move left, and he was about to make it. The school was buzzing. The Instagram post exposing Jack's crimes had spread like wildfire. Students whispered in clusters, their phones gripped tightly as they scrolled through the evidence Emily had posted. Screenshots, reports, anonymous testimonies. Jack Turner was no longer untouchable, and he knew it. Emily walked through the hallway, Lisa and Tommy close behind, the energy around them shifting. She saw it in the way students looked at her now, not as a new girl but as someone who had changed the game. But just as she reached her locker, everything shifted. A sharp voice cut through the air. "Emily Carter." She turned. Jack. He stood in the center of the hallway, his hands in his jacket pockets. His expression was controlled, but his eyes were burning. And this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, several students stood in formation. Not just Mike and Derek, others. Some Emily recognized, members of the football team, guys who thrived under Jack's rule, students who had benefited from his power, students who had something to lose if he went down. The hallway went silent. Lisa's grip on her notebook tightened. Tommy muttered under her breath, "This is bad." Emily stayed calm. She took a step forward, closing the space between her and Jack, keeping her voice steady. "You're making this too easy, Jack." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Oh, am I?" Emily nodded, tilting her head slightly. "This is the part where you try to scare me. Where you make some dramatic speech about how I don't understand what I've done." Jack chuckled. "You really think you've won?" Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Haven't I?" Jack's jaw tightened. And then he moved. Not toward her, toward Lisa. Emily reacted instantly, stepping between them before he could get too close. But that split second of movement, that was what Jack had been waiting for. With a smooth motion, he grabbed the phone from Emily's back pocket, and he held it up for everyone to see. "Looks like we have a problem." Jack's voice was low, dangerous. "This little account? The one leaking all this information?" He turned the phone screen toward the crowd, showing them Emily's login page. "It's hers." A ripple of shock went through the students. The whispers grew louder. Emily's heartbeat stayed steady, but she knew what Jack had done. He'd turned the moment against her. Lisa stiffened beside her. Tommy swore under her breath. Jack smirked. "You want to take me down? Fine. But don't act like you're some innocent hero." He took a slow step closer. "You're just another player in the game." Emily didn't flinch. "So what?" Jack's smirk twitched. He hadn't expected her to own it. Emily crossed her arms. "Yeah, I made the account. Yeah, I exposed you. You think that makes me the bad guy?" Jack's fingers curled around the phone. "I think it makes you reckless." Emily leaned in slightly. No, it makes me smart. Jack exhaled through his nose, clearly frustrated. She wasn't giving him the reaction he wanted. And then, the doors at the end of the hallway swung open. The sheriff stepped inside. Emily's father. He wasn't alone. 2 officers followed. Jack's smirk finally vanished. A teacher, one of the few who had never dared to stand against the Thunder Sons, spoke first. "Sheriff Carter, what's going on?" The sheriff's eyes locked onto Jack first, then flickered toward Emily. "I think you already know." Jack's expression darkened. He turned to Emily, voice lower now. "You called them." Emily's lips curled into a slight smile. "Of course I did." Because Jack had just made his final mistake. He had turned everything into a public spectacle, and now there were witnesses. The tension hit its breaking point. Mike and Derek froze. Sarah backed away, her usual cold demeanor cracking for the first time. The students watching. They weren't looking at Jack with fear anymore. They were looking at him like he was finished. The sheriff took a slow step forward, his voice steady, but heavy with authority. "Jack Turner, we need to have a conversation down at the station." Jack's jaw clenched. He looked around, scanning the hallway, as if looking for an exit, but there wasn't one. Emily had closed every door. Jack inhaled sharply, lifting his hands slightly as the officers approached. Not fighting, not resisting, just defeated. And as they led him down the hall, the weight of what had just happened settled in. Jack Turner had lost. Not in a dramatic, violent fight. Not in some chaotic downfall, but in the one way that truly mattered, in front of everyone. And for the first time in years, Westridge High belonged to the students again. Westridge High was never the same after that day. For years, students had walked these hallways in silence, afraid of the power that Jack Turner and the Thunder Sons held over them. But now, the fear was gone. Jack was expelled. Mike and Derek followed, their involvement in the intimidation and cover-ups too blatant to ignore. Sarah, ever the strategist, distanced herself. She was never formally tied to anything, but everyone knew she had been part of it. The school, once ruled by whispered threats and unspoken rules, finally belonged to the students again. Emily sat on the front steps of the school, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Lisa and Tommy sat beside her, the weight of everything that had happened slowly sinking in. Lisa exhaled, shaking her head. "I still can't believe it." Tommy smirked. "Believe it? Jack Turner's gone." Emily stayed quiet for a moment, watching the students walk by. Lighter, freer. Finally, she said, "It was never just about Jack." Lisa looked at her, frowning slightly. "Then what was it about?" Emily's gaze drifted to her phone. A new message. Anonymous. Jack wasn't the real leader. "See you soon." Her fingers hovered over the screen before she locked it, slipping the phone into her pocket. She had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Emily Carter wasn't done yet, and whoever was watching from the shadows, they knew it.